I want to tell you about something that happened last Thursday morning that most of the financial press is going to bury in a paragraph on page 7. And the ones who do cover it are going to get the story exactly backwards. At 9:14 a.m. Riyadh time, Saudi Aramco completed the settlement of a 1.2 million barrel crude oil contract with Sinopec, China's state oil company. And the payment cleared not in US dollars, not through SWIFT, not through any bank with material exposure to the American financial system. It cleared in yuan in 11 minutes through the cross-border interbank payment system. The transaction was routine. The confirmation was automatic. Nobody in Washington was asked for permission. Every financial outlet that noticed this at all called it a symbolic gesture, a diplomatic signal. Saudi Arabia hedging its bets, a small concession to China that means nothing for the actual dollar-based oil market. I want to argue the exact opposite. Exhale sharply. What happened at 9:14 a.m. Riyadh time last Thursday was not a symbol. It was a proof of concept. And the reason it is a proof of concept rather than a diplomatic nicety is that Saudi Arabia did not make a political decision last Thursday. Saudi Arabia used an infrastructure that China spent 12 years building quietly, specifically so that when this moment came, when a country with Saudi Arabia's weight decided it was ready, the plumbing would already be there, tested, functional, and fast. 11 minutes. That is how long it took to process a transaction that bypasses the most powerful financial enforcement system in human history. That is not symbolism. That is a working alternative. And working alternatives change everything. So let me start with the structural question, not the diplomatic question, not whether MBS is pivoting away from America or whether this signals the end of the U.S.-Saudi security relationship. Those are the questions the think tanks will spend the next month debating. The structural question is this: how does a country settle a crude oil contract worth approximately $108 million in 11 minutes through a system that America's Treasury Department cannot touch, cannot freeze, cannot surveil in real time, and cannot sanction without triggering a diplomatic crisis with 103 other countries that use the same system? The answer has nothing to do with Saudi Arabia's courage or China's diplomatic charm. The answer is architecture. Specifically, the payment architecture that China's People's Bank and its network of state-affiliated financial institutions built between 2012 and 2024, layer by layer, institution by institution, quietly and without announcement, for exactly this purpose. Once you understand what China built and why it built it, last Thursday is not surprising. It is the scheduled output of a machine that has been running for 12 years, and the next transaction will be faster than 11 minutes. Let me start where I always do, with what each actor actually wants, not what they say they want, because in every situation like this, those two things are different in ways that matter enormously. What does America say it wants? America says it wants stable energy markets. It wants its Gulf security partnerships, the ones America has maintained since the 1945 meeting between Roosevelt and Ibn Saud aboard the USS Quincy, to remain the foundation of regional order. It wants SWIFT and the dollar-based financial system to remain the backbone of global trade settlement. That is what America says. What does America actually want? America wants to maintain the structural condition in which no country with significant oil reserves can sell that oil to a major buyer without the transaction flowing through dollar-denominated systems that America can observe, can freeze, and can weaponize as a foreign policy tool. America needs this not just for the revenue. America needs it because the entire architecture of American sanctions power, the thing that makes Iran sanctions work, that makes Russia sanctions bite, that makes North Korea sanctions hurt, depends on the dollar being the only settlement currency. The moment a functional non-dollar oil settlement system exists at scale, every American sanction threat becomes partially negotiable. Every country under sanctions can point to the alternative plumbing and say, we have somewhere else to go. America's actual interest is not oil markets. It is the monopoly on the infrastructure underneath oil markets. Now, what does China say it wants? China says it wants fair and open energy trade. It wants the renminbi to be a legitimate reserve currency. That is what China says. What does China actually want? China wants to permanently dismantle the condition in which America can turn a payment system into a weapon aimed at any country China has a strategic interest in. China has watched America use SWIFT and dollar access to sanction Iran, Venezuela, Russia, Cuba, and North Korea, every one of which is a country China either trades with, has influence over, or views as a buffer state. Every dollar-denominated oil contract is a transaction that routes through a system America controls. America has demonstrated in 5 separate cases over 20 years that it will shut that system off without warning when it suits American foreign policy. China has calculated correctly that allowing that condition to persist indefinitely is not a financial inconvenience. It is a sovereign vulnerability. The yuan oil payment system is not China's version of the petrodollar. It is China's answer to the question, what happens when America tries to sanction us? Those two things, America's need to preserve the settlement monopoly and China's need to destroy it, are structurally incompatible. There is no version of a yuan crude settlement system that is large enough to matter and small enough to leave American financial power intact. And here's the thing that makes last Thursday different from every previous yuan oil test. Saudi Arabia is not Iran. Saudi Arabia is not Venezuela. Saudi Arabia is not a sanctioned pariah state that turns to yuan because it has no other option. Saudi Arabia is America's most important energy partner, the anchor of the petrodollar system, the country that in 1974 agreed with Henry Kissinger to price all of its oil in dollars exclusively in exchange for American security guarantees. When Saudi Arabia uses the yuan settlement system, it is not because Saudi Arabia has no choice. It is because Saudi Arabia calculated that the choice now exists and is worth making. That calculation is the most important financial event of the last decade. And it happened because China built the infrastructure that made it possible to make. Let me walk you through what China actually built. I'm going to call this the parallel settlement architecture. It has 4 layers. Each layer does something specific, and China needed all 4 to be in place before a country with Saudi Arabia's weight would trust the system with a real transaction. The first layer is CIPS itself, the cross-border interbank payment system. CIPS was launched in 2015, but the version that cleared last Thursday's Aramco-Sinopec transaction is not the 2015 version. The 2015 version was a thin wire with 19 participating banks and settlement times measured in hours. What China built between 2015 and 2024 is categorically different. As of January 2024, CIPS has 1,427 direct and indirect participating institutions across 109 countries. It processes an average of 53,000 transactions per day. Its daily settlement volume reached 5.3 trillion yuan, approximately $730 billion, in the fourth quarter of 2023. Settlement time for a standard cross-border institutional transaction is now between 8 and 14 minutes, 11 minutes. That is exactly what Aramco got, not a special arrangement, the standard product. What makes SIPS structurally different from SWIFT is not speed. The structural difference is jurisdictional. SWIFT's infrastructure routes through servers in Belgium and operates under Belgian law, which since 2012 has been subject to American extraterritorial pressure through the US-EU terrorist finance tracking program. When America wants to cut a country out of SWIFT, it calls Brussels and the messaging stops. CIPS routes through servers in Shanghai under Chinese law. American extraterritorial reach does not extend to Shanghai. America cannot call Beijing and ask China to suspend a transaction between Aramco and Sinopec. The jurisdictional firewall is the product. China built it specifically because jurisdictional separation from American enforcement was the feature that mattered. The second layer is the network of WAN clearing banks and Gulf financial centers. A payment system is only as useful as the local banking relationships that connect to it. China solved this between 2018 and 2023 by establishing People's Bank of China designated yuan clearing banks in Abu Dhabi, Doha, Riyadh, and Dubai, not branches of Chinese banks, local institutions. First Abu Dhabi Bank, Qatar National Bank, Saudi National Bank, and Emirates NBD each signed memoranda of understanding with the People's Bank of China to serve as yuan liquidity providers in their respective markets. What this means in practice is that an Aramco treasurer in Riyadh receiving yuan from Sinopec does not need to route through Hong Kong. The yuan lands at Saudi National Bank's yuan clearing desk in Riyadh. If conversion to Saudi Riyal is needed, it happens locally through a bilateral currency swap line that the People's Bank of China established with SAMA, the Saudi Central Bank, in 2023. That swap line carries a capacity of 50 billion yuan, approximately $6.9 billion, renewable annually. The entire transaction stays in Riyadh. No dollar leg, no Swift message, no American visibility. China did not build this network in response to last Thursday. It built this network so that last Thursday would work seamlessly when it arrived. The third layer is the Petro-Yuan futures contract on the Shanghai International Energy Exchange. The SC crude futures contract launched in 2018. The financial press noticed it and then dismissed it when initial volumes were modest. That dismissal missed the point. The SC contract is not designed to replace Brent or WTI immediately. It is designed to give oil producers selling to Chinese buyers a yuan-denominated price reference that does not require a dollar conversion to mean anything. Before SC existed, a yuan crude price was just a dollar price with an exchange rate applied. After SC, a yuan crude price is a yuan crude price, reference to a Shanghai market with 2.4 million contracts of open interest as of December 2023. When Aramco and Sinopec negotiate a yuan contract, they can reference the SC front-month price directly. That removes the dollar from the intellectual framework of the transaction, not just its mechanical routing. And removing the dollar from the intellectual framework of oil pricing is a deeper shift than removing it from a single payments path. The fourth layer is the gold convertibility backstop. This is the layer almost nobody in the Western financial press is reporting seriously, and it is the most structurally important of the four. Saudi Arabia's fundamental concern with holding yuan is not exchange rate risk. It is the question any central bank asks about any reserve asset. What is it ultimately backed by? The dollar's answer, imperfect as it is the full faith and credit of the world's largest economy. China's answer, which it has been building quietly since 2016, is gold. The Shanghai Gold Exchange processed 1,400 tons of physical gold delivery in 2023, the largest physical gold settlement market in the world, surpassing London for physical delivery in 2022. The People's Bank of China officially holds 2,235 tons of gold reserves. Actual holdings, including through state investment vehicles, are assessed by the World Gold Council at between 4,000 and 5,000 tons. The backstop works like this. Saudi Arabia receives yuan for its oil. If it wants to convert that yuan into a hard asset that holds value independent of Beijing's monetary decisions, it buys gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, denominated in yuan, with same-day physical delivery, including, under the 2022 bilateral vault arrangement, delivery to Sama's own gold depository in Riyadh, yuan-to-gold conversion, frictionless, fast, no dollar required. This is China's answer to the convertibility problem that has plagued every reserve currency challenger since Bretton Woods. Not a fixed peg. A liquid, functioning gold market that yuan holders can access on demand. China built it before Saudi Arabia needed it. Last Thursday, Saudi Arabia knew it was there. Let me steelman the American position, because I want you to test this, not just accept it. The American argument is this: one transaction does not end the petrodollar. Aramco settled 1.2 million barrels in yuan. Saudi Arabia produces approximately 9.6 million barrels per day. Last Thursday's contract is 0.013% of daily output. The dollar still denominates more than 98% of global oil trade. SWIFT processes approximately 40 million messages per day. CIPS processes 53,000. The scale difference is a factor of 750. This is a rounding error, not a structural shift. And more, the U.S.-Saudi security relationship is not a financial arrangement. It is a military one. America has 2,500 troops at Prince Sultan Air Base. It has the Carrier Strike Group in the Persian Gulf. It has the Patriot missile batteries defending Saudi oil infrastructure. None of that goes away because Aramco and Sinopec settled one contract in yuan. Saudi Arabia's oil fields are protected by American hardware. That relationship does not root through CIPS, and the yuan has a fundamental problem. It is not freely convertible. China maintains strict capital controls. A country holding large yuan reserves cannot freely deploy them in European equities, American treasuries, or any asset outside what China's capital control framework permits. Dollar reserve currency status rests precisely on this freedom. You can do anything with dollars. With yuan, you can only do China-approved things. That is not a reserve currency. That is a bilateral arrangement with Chinese characteristics. This argument is serious. The scale numbers are real. The security relationship is real. Capital controls are a genuine structural constraint. But here is what the steelman cannot resolve. The question is not whether yuan oil trade replaces dollar oil trade next year. The question is whether a functional, tested, fast alternative now exists for the first time. And as of 9:14 a.m. last Thursday, the answer is yes. Functional alternatives do not need to be dominant to be transformative. America's ability to weaponize SWIFT required that SWIFT was the only option. The moment a working alternative exists, the monopoly is over. Not in volume terms, in structural terms. CIPS does not need to process 40 million messages a day to end that totality. It needs to process enough that a country facing American sanctions can point to it and say, we have somewhere else to go. That threshold was crossed years ago for sanctioned nations. Last Thursday crossed a different threshold. It proved that a country with no sanctions motive, with every geopolitical and economic incentive to preserve the petrodollar relationship, chose the alternative system anyway, because it was ready, because it worked, because China built it, and the capital controls argument runs into the gold layer. Saudi Arabia receiving yuan that can be converted same day into physical gold delivered to Riyadh is not a country locked inside China's capital account. It is a country with a hard asset exit that does not require dollar conversion. That exit exists because China built the Shanghai Gold Exchange large enough for it to matter. From last Thursday, 3 structural paths exist. I want to be precise about each one. The first scenario is quiet normalization. Yuan oil trade expands gradually, and Washington responds with statements, not actions. Under this scenario, Aramco and Sinopec treat last Thursday as the first of a regular series. Spot cargoes become term contracts. By late 2025, yuan-settled transactions represent approximately 480,000 barrels per day of Saudi-China trade, roughly 5% of total Saudi output, approximately 14% of Saudi sales to China. Washington notices. Treasury issues a non-specific statement about the importance of transparent financial systems. The State Department raises it in bilateral talks. MBS says something reassuring about the enduring strength of the U.S.-Saudi partnership. Nothing changes structurally. This is the scenario China has been engineering since 2018. Not a dramatic confrontation, a gradual normalization. By the time yuan oil trade is at 5%, sanctioning it means sanctioning Saudi Arabia, which America will not do. By the time it reaches 10%, the infrastructure is embedded, the clearing banks are fully operational, the SC futures contract has pricing authority, and America is managing a fait accompli rather than preventing a decision. This is the most likely near-term path, and it leads, slowly and deniably, to scenario 3. The second scenario is American escalation, secondary sanctions targeting Gulf banks that clear yuan oil transactions. Under this scenario, a faction inside Treasury and the NSC argues that normalization must be stopped at 1% before it reaches 5%. They propose secondary sanctions targeting CIPS participating banks and Gulf financial centers. Specifically, any bank clearing a yuan-denominated oil transaction involving a Gulf producer faces exclusion from the U.S. correspondent banking system. The structural problem is immediate. First, Abu Dhabi Bank has $270 billion in assets. Qatar National Bank has $320 billion in assets and operates in 28 countries. Saudi National Bank is the largest bank in Saudi Arabia by total assets. Sanctioning their yuan clearing operations means telling the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia simultaneously that their most systemically important financial institutions face American punishment for participating in a currency system those governments chose to join. That is not targeted financial pressure. That is a simultaneous diplomatic rupture with 3 countries that host American military bases. America will not do this. The threat will be made, in softer language, as it has been made 3 times between 2021 and 2023. The banks are still clearing yuan, the system is still running, and every time America makes the threat without following through, China's parallel architecture gains one more rung of operational credibility. The bluff is its own kind of proof of concept. The third scenario is the one China has been building toward since 2012, and the one nobody in Washington is publicly preparing for. Under this scenario, last Thursday is not an isolated transaction. It is the public surface of a negotiation that has been running in private for 2 years. Specifically, Saudi Arabia and China are in advanced discussions, reported by the Wall Street Journal in March 2024 and confirmed by 3 separate Gulf banking sources, about a permanent pricing arrangement in which a defined percentage of Chinese crude purchases from Saudi Arabia, reported at 20 to 25%, are priced and settled in yuan as a structural feature of the bilateral energy relationship. If that arrangement is formalized, it is not a transaction, it is a treaty. Approximately 1.5 million barrels per day of Saudi crude, the world's most important bilateral oil trade, has a permanent yuan leg. At that scale, the SC futures contract becomes a genuine global price reference. At that scale, Kuwait, the UAE, and Iraq face the question of whether they want to be the last ones pricing exclusively in dollars when their largest customer is offering a tested, gold-backed alternative that clears in 11 minutes. This is the scenario that structurally ends the petrodollar, not with a declaration, not with a crisis, with a percentage, with a defined allocation, with a permanent feature of the world's most important energy relationship denominated in a currency America cannot sanction, clearing through a system America cannot touch, backed by gold that can be delivered to Riyadh the same day. China built toward this scenario for 12 years. Last Thursday was not the destination. Last Thursday was the proof of concept that makes the destination visible to everyone who is paying attention. 3 specific signals to watch. Because in the next 60 days, what happens will tell you which scenario is actually unfolding. The first signal is whether Saudi National Bank issues any operational guidance about yuan liquidity capacity. SNB is the designated yuan clearing bank in Riyadh. It holds the bilateral swap line with Sama. If SNB expands its yuan clearing infrastructure, higher daily settlement limits, extended operating hours, additional yuan desk headcount, that is SNB preparing for a significant volume increase. Banks do not expand infrastructure speculatively. They expand it when they know the volume is coming. The second signal is whether the Shanghai International Energy Exchange's SC futures contract open interest crosses 3 million contracts in the next 30 days. It was at 2.4 million in December 2023. A sudden move to 3 million means institutional participants, producers and buyers, are loading SC positions in anticipation of a pricing reference shift. The SHFE daily data is public. Watch it. A sharp open interest move in SC is not a technical trading signal. It is the market pricing in the treaty before the treaty is announced. The third signal is whether Wang Yi or a senior People's Bank of China official visits Riyadh without a publicly announced agenda. The 2 previous yuan oil discussions, the ones the Wall Street Journal reported, were preceded by last-minute or unannounced senior Chinese visits to Saudi Arabia. Quiet visits mean the conversation is too sensitive for public framing. If a senior Chinese official travels to Riyadh with no listed agenda in the next 30 days, that visit is about the percentage, about the formal allocation, about the 20 to 25% that turns a proof of concept into a structural feature. Let me bring this together. America built the petrodollar in 1974. It built it on a single arrangement. Saudi Arabia prices oil in dollars. America guarantees Saudi security. It was not an economic argument. It was a structural deal that made the dollar the only language in which global energy could be spoken. For 50 years, that arrangement held. Not because alternatives did not exist in theory, because no functional alternative existed in practice. Last Thursday at 9:14 a.m. Riyadh time, a functional alternative existed in practice. 1.2 million barrels, $108 million equivalent, 11 minutes, no SWIFT, no dollar leg, no American permission, no American awareness until after the confirmation was already on the screen. China built SIEPs to 1,127 institutions across 109 countries. China built the yuan clearing banks in Abu Dhabi, Doha, Riyadh, and Dubai. China built the SC futures contract to 2.4 million contracts of open interest. China accumulated official gold reserves of 2,235 tons and built the Shanghai Gold Exchange into the world's largest physical gold settlement venue. China established the Sama bilateral swap line at 50 billion yuan capacity. China built all of it without a treaty, without a press release, without a single public statement saying, we are building the infrastructure that will end the petrodollar. It built it the same way it built everything that has changed the structure of this century, quietly, patiently, rung by rung, and last Thursday, Saudi Arabia used it. America's response was a paragraph on page 7. That is not a diplomatic failure. That is what happens when one side builds the infrastructure of the next 50 years and the other side is still managing the infrastructure of the last 50. The machine cleared in 11 minutes. The argument cleared with it. That is not prophecy. That is structural history. And the invoice was already confirmed before Washington knew to look. Push back on this if you see it differently. Read the Bank for International Settlements quarterly review of CIPS transaction volumes and participating institution growth from December 2023. The numbers are in the public domain. Read the Wall Street Journal's March 2024 reporting on Saudi-China yuan pricing discussions and the specific percentage figures cited by Gulf banking sources. Read the World Gold Council's 2023 annual report comparing Shanghai Gold Exchange physical delivery volumes to the London Bullion Market Association. The crossover year is documented. Read the People's Bank of China's published data on bilateral currency swap line agreements with SAMA and the other Gulf central banks. Pull the SHFE daily market data on SC crude futures open interest. It is updated every trading day. It is free, and the trend line over 24 months is not ambiguous. The architecture is documented. The transaction happened. The system that processed it in 11 minutes was not built last Thursday. It was built across 12 years, institution by institution, swap line by swap line, while the financial press was writing about whether the yuan would ever be a reserve currency and missing the point entirely. Watch what China does not announce next. Because in this story, as in every great structural shift in modern financial history, the move that changes everything is the one that arrives looking like routine.